The prison without bars. The war was over, but some things don't end just because the weapons go quiet. On a small, sun-beaten colony at the edge of the galaxy, Cale worked quietly inside a white steel clinic. He moved slowly, gently. His hands had healed hundreds, some human, some not, but no matter the skin color or blood type, he treated them all the same. His coat was wrinkled. His eyes were tired. But there was always calm in his voice. Even when he was angry, no one could tell. Outside the clinic, the desert winds howled. Inside, Cale stitched up a miner's leg, humming softly. Then the door opened and the room changed. She stepped in wearing a long dark cloak. Her face was hidden, but her presence was sharp, tall, silent, controlled. The other patients froze. Even the miner stopped talking mid-sentence. A Zanari. One of them. The enemy from the war. The kind who flew warships with claws instead of keys. The kind who never blinked when burning down entire cities. The kind who were supposed to be locked away, not walking into a human medic's clinic. Cale didn't flinch. He looked up, nodded once, and said calmly, "You're injured. Come in." The woman removed her hood. Her skin shimmered silver blue. Long lines of scars marked one side of her jaw. Her eyes glowed violet, beautiful and terrifying. Sharp, but sad. She sat on the medical bench. Quiet. The other patients stared. One even stepped out without saying a word. She didn't notice, or didn't care. Cale walked over and gently pulled her sleeve back. There was a deep slice across her upper arm. Partly burned, partly infected. "How long?" he asked. 3 days, she answered. "This should have been cleaned on day 1. I didn't expect to be alive on day 2. He didn't ask what happened. She didn't offer it. As he cleaned the wound, she finally spoke. Softly, carefully. "I thought you'd hate me." Cale paused for only half a second, then continued wrapping the bandage. "I've hated enough," he said. "It didn't help then, won't help now." She blinked. No one had ever answered her like that. "Your name?" he asked. "Zalira." "I'm Cale." "I know." He glanced up. "You've heard of me?" "You treated Commander Hess during the war. He was my enemy, but you saved him anyway." Cale nodded slowly. "I don't choose sides with blood. I choose sides with wounds." Silence settled between them again. Then she looked at him and said, "This place is peaceful." He smiled faintly. "On the outside." She tilted her head. "You see these walls?" he said, gesturing around the room. "No bars, no fences, no guards, but everyone here is trapped." "Trapped by what?" "Memories, guilt, silence." Zalira looked down at her arm. "What if they deserve to be trapped?" "Maybe," Cale said, "but healing doesn't wait for justice." He finished tying the final bandage, then stood. "You'll need to rest. Come back in 2 days for cleaning." She stood too. "I don't have a room." He walked to the cabinet, pulled out a key card, and handed it to her. Bunk 12. End of the hallway. Zalira stared at the key in her hand like it was a weapon. "Why are you helping me?" "Because you asked," he said. And then he went back to his desk like nothing happened. That night, she sat on the bed in bunk 12. Clean sheets, a glass of water, a small folded towel. She hadn't had this much comfort in years. Yet her heart ached more now than on the battlefield, because kindness was heavier than cruelty. And Cale hadn't looked at her like a monster, not once. In the clinic, Cale sat alone reading an old file. Not hers, but a war record. Zalira Tasayan, former Zanari fleet commander, surrendered during the last siege, refused to fight, saved 137 human prisoners. He closed the file slowly, looked out the window, and whispered, "So that's why you're really here." Scars that don't fade. The next morning was cold, unusual for the edge of Velthar's desert, where heat usually pressed against the skin like a second layer. Today the sky was covered in thin gray clouds and the air smelled of coming rain. Cale unlocked the clinic early. He didn't expect her to return so soon, but she was already sitting outside. Quiet. Still. Her silver blue skin caught the morning, light like polished stone, but her eyes were fixed on nothing. She looked like a statue, except for the tired breath in her chest. He opened the door. "You're early," he said. Zelira stood slowly. "You said to return in 2 days." "I didn't. Want to give the wound more time to rot." He gestured her in. "Good instincts, come on." Inside, she sat on the same medical bench. Cale rolled up her sleeve. The bandage was still clean, but beneath it the wound was slow to close. "Your kind heals fast," he said. "This isn't healing fast." Zelira stayed quiet. Cale looked at her face. "Are you sleeping?" "Not often." "Eating?" "Not since the last ship drop." "Water?" "Enough." He raised one eyebrow. "You're lying." She smirked, just barely. "I'm surviving." "Surviving is not healing." He pressed gently on the edge of the wound. She didn't flinch. "You don't react to pain," he said. "We were trained that way." "Why?" Zelira looked at him now, and something behind her eyes shifted. "Because we weren't allowed to feel things we couldn't fix." Cale unwrapped his sleeve quietly, revealed a long, smooth scar across his right forearm. "Burned. Deep old. This," he said, "was from your side." She stared. "Naval plasma. Low angle. Just missed the bone." He wrapped it again, then looked at her wound. "This," he tapped her shoulder gently, "was from ours. Landmine shrapnel," she said softly. "5th cycle. During retreat." Neither of them moved for a moment, then Cale said something that stunned her. "And yet we're both sitting here." Outside, thunder rolled in the distance. Cale cleaned the wound in silence, then started rebandaging. Zelira looked around the room. It was small, plain. A few old photos on the wall, none recent. No family, no medals, no flags. "You stayed here, after the war?" she asked. "Yes." "Why?" "Because the ones who needed healing were left behind." She tilted her head. "And you don't hate us?" He looked her in the eyes. "I did. For a while. Then I realized hate didn't rebuild bones or close wounds. And now I don't waste time deciding who deserves care." She opened her mouth to speak, but stopped. Cale finished wrapping her arm, then surprised her again. "Want something to eat?" Her eyes widened slightly. "You cook?" "Depends on your definition." He stood and walked toward the small kitchen. Unit in the back. She followed. They sat across from each other, sharing a plate of steamed roots and fried starch rolls. Nothing fancy, but warm safe. Zelira spoke first. "I never thought I'd sit like this. With a human. Do you still see us as enemies?" "No," she said, then paused. "But sometimes I still feel like one." "You're not alone." She looked at him. "You too?" He nodded. "There are people on this colony who won't sit with me either." She touched her scar slowly. "They see what I was, not what I chose." "Then they're not worth your energy," Cale said. Zelira looked at him for a long time, then whispered, "You look at me like I'm not broken." He smiled softly. "Because I know the difference between scars and open wounds." A memory between them. The night was full of rain. It tapped softly against the clinic windows, running in slow silver trails down the glass. Inside, a backup lantern flickered near the desk. The power lines had gone dark 2 hours ago. Cale didn't mind. Storms were a break from the usual heat. He sat with a book in one hand and a half-empty mug in the other. Quiet. Still. Then, the door opened. Zelira stood in the frame, hood dripping. "Lights are out in the bunkhouse," she said. "No heat, either." Cale motioned her in. "Come warm up." She sat across from him, closer to the lantern's soft orange glow. She looked tired, not weak, just heavy. He poured her a cup of the same drink he had, some kind of root tea, bitter but warm. They sat in silence for a few minutes. Then Kale spoke. How long did you serve? Zalira stared into her mug. 12 cycles. Started at 17. Commander by 23. That's fast. Zanari leadership doesn't wait. Human leadership never trusts. They both smiled, just slightly. Another beat of silence. The lantern buzzed. Then she said something unexpected. Do you remember the outpost at Phelan Ridge? Kale's hand froze on the mug. His smile faded. His voice was slow, cautious. Yes, I was there, she said. So was I. Outside, thunder rolled low like a warning drum. Inside, the air grew cold. Kale stared into the flame. You were on the ridge or the valley? Ridge, she said. Defensive line. He nodded. I was in the rescue unit, Valley team. We tried to pull out the civilians. Zalira's voice was quieter now. Your side lost many. Kale looked at her. So did yours. She leaned back, closing her eyes. I gave the order to collapse the cliffs, to stop the artillery, but I knew it would bury both sides. You buried my medic camp, Kale said softly. She didn't open her eyes. I know. I carried a child out of that rubble, he continued. Her lungs were filled with dust. She didn't make it. Zalira's breath caught. I remember seeing your medics run through the smoke. I didn't think anyone survived. Some didn't, he said. Some did. She looked at him now, not as a soldier, not as a commander, but as someone with blood on her hands. Why are you looking at me like that? She asked, voice strained. Like what? Like I didn't cause it. Kale leaned forward. Because you were doing what you thought would stop more killing. And it didn't. No, he said. But now you're here, trying to heal. The lantern flickered. Rain whispered against the windows. Zalira whispered. I thought you'd finally hate me. Kale smiled. Just enough. I did. Once. When I didn't know your name. The storm deepened outside, but inside 2 old enemies sat quietly, not talking like soldiers, but like people who had survived something no one else would ever fully understand. The test of pain. The storm had passed by morning, but something new was coming. The colony's mining district had reported an underground blast, unstable ground, fallen debris, and several injured. The clinic filled fast. Kale moved quickly, giving orders to assistants, organizing supplies, checking pulses, sealing cuts. And Zalira? She didn't wait to be asked. She was already helping. A human miner with a crushed ankle cried out as she approached. He backed away wide-eyed. Get her away from me, he shouted. She's Zanari. Zalira stopped. Not because she was afraid, because she was used to it. The others stared. Kale looked up. She's here to help, he said. The miner growled. She helped bomb my brother's unit, I know that face. Kale didn't flinch. He walked right up to the man crouched and said, and yet she just carried 3 wounded humans on her back while you stood here bleeding. The room fell quiet. The miner looked at Zalira again. She didn't say a word. She only handed him a pain patch. Slowly, he took it. The day stretched on. Blood. Burns. Broken limbs. Zalira moved like a ghost. Silent. Efficient. Focused. Her old commander training showed in everything she did, but this time, it was used to save, not destroy. That night, after the last patient was stable, Kale sat on the clinic steps under the stars. His hands were shaking. He hadn't realized how much the day took from him. Then a shadow moved beside him. Zalira sat, down quietly. They didn't speak at first. Then she said, You defended me. He nodded. Because you deserved it. Not everyone agrees. They don't have to. She looked at her hands, still stained with someone else's blood. I used these hands to fire cannons, she said. To give orders that destroyed cities. And today? Kale asked. I used them to stop a boy from bleeding out. He looked at her calm and steady. Then today, they did more good than all the hate in the galaxy. She turned to him, her voice low. Why don't you fear me? Because I've seen fear, he said. It looks nothing like you. A breeze moved across the clinic roof. Cool, soft, peaceful. She watched the stars. So did he. And for the first time, there was no war between them, not in words, not in silence, not even in memory. The trial of peace. Peace was a fragile thing. Sometimes it ended with explosions, sometimes with signatures, and sometimes with one quiet conversation in a government office. Cale stood at the edge of a small platform, facing 3 Earth Alliance officials. All were dressed in polished black uniforms with golden stripes. Behind them, a small shuttle hummed, ready for departure. They had come for him, and not for good reasons. The woman in the center, Director Vaughn, folded her hands. Commander, Cale, your service here has not gone unnoticed. Your work with alien and human recovery is remarkable. Cale said nothing. We're offering you a position back on Terra Prime, head of interspecies trauma care, clean halls, high pay, recognition. What's the condition? He asked. You'll leave this outpost within the week, and cut contact with certain subjects. Cale's eyes darkened. Say her name. Zalira, Vaughn said coldly. Former Zenari commander, war participant, security risk. Meanwhile, in the city's east tower, Zalira stood watching the shuttle from a distance. She already knew what was happening. Word traveled fast in small colonies. People whispered. He's leaving. They won't let him stay near her. It was always temporary. She turned away from the window. Back. At the platform, Cale stared at the officials. You want me to leave the person I trust most just to wear a cleaner badge? Vaughn gave a thin smile. You deserve better than this dust-covered outpost. So does she, he replied. That night, Cale didn't return to the clinic. He found Zalira standing beside the crash site of her old ship, now a rusted skeleton, in the sand. They had come here before. It was the one place where neither of them had to speak much. She turned as he approached. So, she said softly. When do you leave? He stepped closer. I'm not. Her eyes blinked slowly. Confused. You're staying. I already made my choice, he said. Long before they came, Zalira looked down. They'll mark you for this. They already did. You gave up everything. He shook his head. I kept what matters. She looked at him. Really looked at him. His eyes weren't tired anymore. Not empty. Not angry. They were quiet. Full. Alive. I thought you'd hate me, she whispered again. But Cale only smiled. I did once, for a moment. But now, I'd rather build something with you. The shuttle left without him. The officials filed their report, and the colony, for the first time in years, felt like home. The ones who won't forget. Weeks passed. Peace settled over the colony like soft dust, quiet and thin but real. Cale and Zalira worked side by side in the clinic now. People still stared when she walked by, but fewer turned away. Some even nodded. Children waved at her, not because they forgot the war, but because she helped when no one else did. One evening, as the suns dipped low, Cale adjusted the lights in the clinic while Zalira closed a storage drawer. You're quiet. Tonight, he said. I feel calm, she replied. Strange, isn't it? A little. He smiled. I like strange. She smirked, just barely. But calm doesn't stay long on the edge of the galaxy. Not when grudges still live. Not when memory burns. The first sign came in the form of static over the colony speaker system. Then a warning siren. Short and sharp, an emergency broadcast followed. Unregistered vessel landing outside perimeter. All civilians stay indoors. Cale grabbed his medkit out of habit. Zalira went for her side blade. You don't have to go, he said. She didn't reply. They both went. The unregistered ship wasn't large, but the men who stepped out wore no uniforms. Black armor, white masks, the kind who didn't fight for flags but for revenge. Rogue human ex-military, their leader pointed toward the colony with one word, Zenari. They moved quickly. They weren't looking for loot. They were looking for her. Kale and Zelira reached the center square before the shooting started. An explosion rocked the outer clinic wall. Glass shattered. A child screamed. Zelira didn't wait. She moved fast, faster than she had since the war, covering people, pulling them to safety. Kale found himself beside her, breathless. "They came for you," he said. "I know. You can run. I won't." A shot fired from the ridge, aimed at a woman dragging her son. Before the bullet hit, Zelira blocked it with her shoulder. She fell. Kale ran to her. No, stay with me. Stay with." Blood dripped from her wound. She grabbed his collar. "They want to make me a monster again." "You're not," he said fiercely. "Then prove it," she whispered. "Don't let them win." Kale stood, took her blade, and turned to face the attackers. The colony security arrived late, but they arrived angry. The rogue soldiers fled, but 2 were captured. Kale stood over them, breathing hard. "You came for a ghost," he said. "But all you found was someone who saved lives." Zelira recovered, slowly, quietly, as always. When she opened her eyes 2 days later, Kale was there. "As always," she whispered. "You almost died." He smiled. "So did you. Was it worth it?" He kissed her forehead gently. "Yes." A new name for peace. Days passed, then weeks, and Zelira healed, just like before. But something was different now, not just in her body, in the way people looked at her. Children no longer ran from her shadow. They ran to her, asking for stories, pointing at the faint scar on her shoulder like it was a badge of honor. In the market, an old man who once refused to look her in the eyes now handed her fruit without charge. And at the entrance to the clinic, a fresh carving had been added beside the door. "We heal together." Kale stood beside her one morning watching the sunrise. "Feels like things changed," he said. Zelira nodded. "Not because they forgot," she said, "but because they saw." He looked at her. "What do they see?" She turned to him. "Not a Zanari, not a soldier." She took his hand. "They see us." 1 week later, a representative from the Earth Alliance arrived, not with weapons, but with words. A crowd gathered outside the clinic as the officer stepped up to the small platform. For bravery in defense of civilians, and for acts of compassion that reached across species lines, Zelira of the Zanari is hereby granted protected citizenship under the Interstellar Peace Accord. There was silence, then clapping, then cheering. Someone shouted, "Speech!" Zelira glanced at Kale. He smiled and nodded. She stepped up, looked at the crowd, and said only this: "I once believed peace was weakness. Now I know. It's the strongest thing I've ever tried to carry." After the applause, Kale pulled her aside, held up a datapad. "What's this?" she asked. "A new clinic, full funding, frontier territory. They want us to run it." She blinked. "You're leaving this place?" "Not leaving," he said. "Starting over. Together." And so they did. On a quiet moon where war hadn't yet reached, where faces were new and wounds still fresh, they built something. Not big. Not loud but honest. Healing rooms, small lights, shared meals, and 2 chairs always side by side. People came from far stars just to see the place where a human and a Zanari saved each other. Not with weapons, not with orders, but with something harder. Forgiveness. And every time someone asked how they started, Zelira would smile and whisper, "I told him, I thought you'd hate me." And he just smiled.